Hi everyone, and welcome to my video about how to get into Path of Exile. So I hear a lot from people that they have tried the game long ago and then they gave up halfway through the campaign, or they never really made it past Act 1 because they were completely lost and these kind of things. And I'm here to help you out if you ever wanted to try the game for the first time, or maybe you have done so but didn't really get far. And I want to give you some pointers about how you can actually make it through the campaign, get into endgame, get your first character going, and all these kind of things. So this guide is not actually aiming at explaining the entire game to you. I have actually another video for that, and this is my Path of Exile beginner guide that I made quite a long time ago on my main channel. So here I talk about how do skills and classes work, and the passive tree and items and these kind of things. In this video here, I mostly want to talk you through the kind of mindset that you need, and also where you can find the info that you might be looking for, such as starter guides, build guides, just what you need to pay attention to when you get started. So I've prepared a few points here that I want to talk you through of how to get into the game. So first point is watching the beginner's guide. So that's the one I just highlighted. For example, you can also go look for other ones. But essentially you should understand how the game works. So for example, how do the skills work, what to look out for in the passive tree. So all the stuff is actually explained in this video, and it's 19 minutes. So I really tried to keep this one concise, but have all the important info in there to kind of give you the whole picture. Obviously you can find many other videos and written formats out there, so just go look for something that you like and go check it out. So the next tip that I give to people all the time is follow a starter build guide down to the last detail. So I cannot stress this enough. You can go look for guides for all kinds of builds. You can play melee, a caster, minion build, totem build, mines, bow, whatever. There are definitely builds that work basically out of the box for everything in the game, but chances are that as a new player, when you start out, you will most likely not really make a well-working build. So rather look for a guide and pay special attention to those that actually include leveling sections in the guide. So something that talks you through how to get through the acts, which gems to use at that point and at that point. Maybe they even have a bit of a progression for the passive tree so that you understand where to put your points and not get lost on the way. If you find build guides that are completely annihilating endgame, that's nice and all, but this doesn't really help you when you want to start level 1 and have no clue how to get there. This is the passive tree here, and this is quite a beast for new players to kind of get a feeling for. Even though it has a very defined system to it and there are rules to follow of how to make a build, you will probably have a bit of trouble at the start, so don't be very adventurous here. Find a guide that shows you where to go at specific levels and follow that. Even if you find the most amazing sounding passives here on the tree that you might want for your build, you stick to the guide. Trust me on that, most of the guide videos that you can find out there, not just from me, from anyone, are usually done by experienced players with a bit of thought involved, and they understand the basics of how to make a build. Here's a list of current builds that I would recommend as starters. This is definitely not the full list, this is just some stuff that I wrote down, but there is definitely more out there that you can go check out, and whatever strikes your fancy, you can just go with that. Now once you've actually decided on the build to play that you like, you want to start out with your character. So you create a character, you wake up on the Twilight Strand at level 1 and you start blasting. So here are some tips of how to get through the campaign. So first point is stick to the build that you want to play. Don't try to be adventurous and then go for some kind of fire caster build and suddenly change it to some melee cold build or something like this. So stick to the guide, as I said, and make sure that the synergies kind of make sense on your tree. So typically you stack up some life, you stack up one elemental type or something like that, or maybe physical or chaos damage. So usually don't have multiple damage types, and then it comes down to, do you use totems maybe, so you want to stack up some totem stuff, or do you cast things, so you want to stack up maybe cast speed and spell damage, and then just make sure that it all kind of works together. The second point is never stand still when you're playing, so you always want to maybe run around, attack, run around again, attack again. So this is typically the way how you can survive the best. Try to dodge enemy attacks when they come at you, don't get cornered, and also a lot of projectile attacks you can easily dodge by just sidestepping here and there, and you have much less incoming damage. So there are a lot of enemies that hurt a lot, especially telegraphed boss attacks, so you want to pay attention to those and don't get slammed by something that you could have easily walked out of. Next is use the items and the currency that you find while leveling. So currency can be all kinds of shapes and colors. So this is the so-called currency tab here, and you see there's a lot of different stuff, and all of these do something. So that's, for example, the portal scroll and the scroll of wisdom. These are like the most basics of currencies. So you can open a portal to town, you can identify an unidentified item, and then there's something to improve quality of items. There is something to make a white item into rare or into blue, or tons of ways how you can change an item, change the sockets, and all these kind of things. So to get more and more sophisticated the further you go, but the bottom line is you want to use them to actually speed up your progression. Don't just hold on to everything that you find. You can definitely pick up some white item on the ground, throw, for example, an Orb of Alchemy on it to make it a rare, and then just equip it if it rolls something good, and keep going like that. Nothing you find in a campaign is really very valuable unless you get super lucky with an Exalted Orb drop, but this is almost about it. A similar point that is connected to this is the crafting bench. So at some point in the campaign you will unlock hideouts, and you will be able to have like your own little area where you have like some NPCs. This comes from Helena, which you will find in I think Act 3 or something. And here's a crafting bench, and you can put in an item, and then you can add certain modifiers that is missing, for example. So you see here this like light blue colored cold and chaos resistance on my belt is a crafted mod, and you can use this especially in the early campaign to get more resistances. Resistances are absolutely vital to survive, and you want to make sure that you always have 75 fire, cold, and lightning resistance at the very least, especially once you progress to the later acts, because the game is balanced around that number. You find these recipes over time in the campaign, so don't worry much about them. You just unlock them basically on the fly, and whenever you find a new item that doesn't have full modifiers, you can try to craft something on it. And the last point for progression is don't pick up too much trash. So you find a lot of loot on the ground, and essentially white items are completely useless unless they roll the right sockets and the right colors. So I can show that real quick. So here you can see some loot on the ground. So this is like a knife, and here's a mace, and you can see these little like colored icons on the side of the item, and this is the links. You can see those two green sockets, and they are actually linked together, so there's a little line between them. And here there's no line, which means they're unlinked. And typically you look out for the right colors for your build. There is a system to those colors, so essentially melee builds and fire type builds go for a lot of red, then caster builds and lightning type builds go for a lot of blue, and you have like your ranger, dexterity, and cold builds that are green. So this doesn't necessarily apply to all the skills that you're going to be using. Usually there's a bit of variety of all colors in your build, but this is a bit of a guideline for you to look out for. But aside from this, you don't really care about white items at all most of the time, and you mostly want to just pick up like blues and later on rares that you can try to identify and get an upgrade from. One little tip that I can give for starting out in especially Act 1, Act 2, you can just pick up also blue items that you find, and if you know you don't really want to identify them or don't even have enough scrolls to identify them, then just vendor them unidentified, and like this you can get Orb of Transmutation, and those on the other hand you can vendor again to get the Scroll of Wisdom. So this is like a good way to get started with some scrolls that you can use for identifying actual better items. Again, go check out the beginner guide of how the game works, how to play the game. This might help you out. And next tip I have is play the game. So don't hesitate just because you don't really know what's going on, or because you might be confused, or you might be maybe even stuck or something like that. Just keep going. Even if you run into some super hard boss that you can't beat easily yet, you can basically just keep trying until this is over and you can continue with the campaign. Maybe take another look at your guide to figure out if you can change something for your build. And like this, you step by step learn more about the game. If you're wondering if now is a good time to get into the game, I would say definitely yes. The new league is coming with an endgame expansion patch. Like, it's gonna be pretty huge and pretty amazing. There's gonna be a lot of hype, and you better get going right now to get started early, get a feel for the game, and then you can jump into the new league. If you haven't done so already, you can get Path of Exile directly on Steam for free. So this is a free-to-play game, but it has in-game microtransactions, which is mostly for stash tabs and for like MTX it's called. So these are like transmogs and like graphical updates to your character mostly, and maybe some pets and these kind of little fancy things. If you are worried about stash tabs and paying a lot for the game, it's not really that bad. So typically you don't need any of them when you start out for the campaign. You can just throw everything in the few stash tabs that you have and then worry about it later. So you can try it out, and if you don't like it, you didn't lose anything. Here's a list of tabs that I would recommend to buy when there's a sale. So especially must have is map tab, currency tab, and fragment tab. And then there's a few nice to have, especially one quad tab, which is something like this. So a standard tab would look like this. This is what you start out with. And then a quad tab is 4 times that. So everything is just times 4 and you have more space. This is really nice to just dump your loot in there and then sort it out later. And then there's some other tabs that are kind of fancy, but not really great. For example, the unique tab, where you can have like a full connection of all uniques. You don't really need that kind of stuff. Same with the blight. So there's a list. And if you don't want to pay too much at the start early on, then just go with at least those 3 and maybe a quad tab. Next thing I can recommend to you is using the wiki regularly. So this is the official Path of Exile wiki. This is very helpful, has a lot of articles about anything you can think about, and has very like mechanical explanations of how stuff works in a game. So you can even find stuff like list of, and then you can see like there's lots of stuff that you can just go check out and browse if you like, if you're curious about unique items, or if you're looking for skill gems, there's lists like that. You can look up like how does life work or how does evasion work. You can look up a skill gem that you might be using and see some details there, how it scales, how it levels up, maybe some details about a zone or an enemy. You don't have to do this at every corner, but here and there you're gonna find things that you might want to learn more about, and the wiki is extremely helpful for this. So the link is also in the description. Next up, we have the loot filters. So there are loot filters in the game, because otherwise you're just gonna get drowned in absolute insane amounts of trash loot that you never want to look at. There are so many items that most builds don't care about at all, and then there's like these white items that don't have any value. So you want to usually filter this out. It's not too important in the first acts of the campaign, but it is definitely helpful to install one at the very least once you finish campaign. This is a very simple process, so you can go to this website, it's called filterblade.xyz, and you go here and it will have this download button here. Usually have like pre-select the right stuff anyway. So you go to download, and then there is this download all strictness levels. So you get this one as single files, and then you put it into your documents, my games, Path of Exile folder. So this looks like this. You just throw it in there and you will have those filters ready to use in the game. So when you go to the options in the game settings, here are the filters, and then typically they are these here, filter blade with different strict levels. So you can start with soft, and if it shows too much trash for you, then you can change it higher and higher. Basically, the further you progress, typically you want to range somewhere between like the 1 to 4 or so, depending on what you're playing and where you are. This step just takes a minute, but it is definitely worth it, because everything is just gonna look much nicer and you're gonna identify valuable items much more easily compared to just the plain like standard game definition of what the loot looks like. And lastly, I have to say, don't despair when you start out with the game. So it is definitely a huge game that has seen almost a decade of constant updates, patches, all that kind of stuff. So it has evolved from something that was basically very similar to Diablo 2, or even less than that, to basically one of the biggest games out there. And this is both a curse and a boon. In any case, I believe it's a good time to get started with the game anyway, even if it has already been out for so long. There are a lot of people, there is a very active Reddit, it has a great, amazing active community. So there's a lot of stuff going on, lots of players, and it will keep getting updated probably for eternity, who knows. Somewhere on the horizon there's also Path of Exile 2, which is a huge update to the game that's coming probably in the next year or two, and that will probably also attract an insane amount of attention. The game is really fun because you have lots of customization, you can make the craziest kinds of builds, and you also have lots of freedom in what you're farming and how you're farming it. So it starts out quite difficult, but once you understand the basics, you know, figuring out the connection between, for example, the socket colors and what type of builds are connected to that, how a build works in general, how you move around with your character, how you fight certain enemies, how the market works. You learn more and more piece by piece as you play the game, as you play a league and maybe another one and another one. And my last point for this video is don't be afraid to ask questions. Everyone here was a noob once, and obviously you don't learn if you don't try and if you don't ask people. So there are people that will help you out. There are content creators with their streams and their YouTubes and their Discord communities, just like myself or many others that are great, amazing content creators that you can find. So don't be afraid, go and ask and talk to people and let them help you. Personally, I try to read through every single YouTube comment. I try to answer stuff on stream. I'm streaming pretty much daily. And I also have my own Discord server with PoE channels. And there's also stuff like my Path of Buildings and these kind of things. So go check it out if you like. And with this, we're gonna conclude this video here. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope that this helps you to get started, get motivated to try out Path of Exile. It is a great game. I've been playing it for quite a while. So personally, I've clocked in around 3,000 hours in the game itself. This doesn't even count all the reading and watching and theory crafting that I have done. So it's probably well over 5K because I've actually been doing that almost more than playing the game. I'll definitely have a lot more guides coming up for PoE in the near future. So I'll be working on those to help you guys out with all topics regarding Path of Exile. So let me know what would be of interest for you, what could really help you out to get going, or something you might have questions about and want to get a deeper dive for, and I'll try to work on it. So I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you guys next time.